What's up, guys? This is day 2 of the open source vlog that I'm doing. Yesterday we talked about where do we start. So we looked at Rails, we looked at Devise, didn't really find anything that we could contribute to, at a glance at least. I think we can take a look at Rails and Devise maybe every day or something like that, and just kind of see what's out there. So maybe we stumble into something that's a new ticket that we can maybe stumble on, and maybe we can solve it. We just have to kind of keep an eye on those tickets. So let's just do a quick glance through here and see if we can find anything. I feel like we probably won't, but or they would take a lot of time and sort of effort into solving. So Rails scopes generating invalid scope type messages don't appear to come from one particular place, and I'm not doing anything particularly custom. That seems very vague. Example code would be useful. We could probably comment in there and be like, do you have any example code that could be reproducing it? Maybe that's what we want to do. I don't know. I kind of feel like trying to dive into Rails just at the beginning here is going to take some time. So let's probably just take a look at Devise and then get back to Simple Calendar, which we decided to tackle yesterday. So it doesn't look like there's anything new on Devise's open issues, so we can get back to Simple Calendar. Now, I will say that this morning, I got an issue on here from Rodrigo, and he was working on getting RSpec working, and he submitted a pull request a few hours ago. So he added this bin setup and bin console. So basically what he's trying to do is set this up so that you can test Simple Calendar easier. And I've actually written 0 tests for Simple Calendar, and I think that would be awesome to get done on the gem. So maybe we'll dive into that with him, because it seems like a really great starting point. If you find a gem with no tests, there you go. That's an easy thing to start working on. Adding tests, even the most basic tests that are like, when I require the gem, I should be able to access this class. Those tests are valid, so those are useful to add. So let's take a look at the code that he wrote. If you see the conversation, he basically just said, adding these will simplify a lot for people who want to debug or test Simple Calendar. Recommend adding a custom console attached in the request. So this bin console file that he's added works really similar to Rails console. It loads up bundler, loads up Rails, which is the dependency for Simple Calendar, and then requires IRB and starts an IRB session. And since it's Ruby, it's already loaded the Simple Calendar gem in Rails, and that's it. You should be good to go. And bin setup will install the dependencies. So that would basically install Rails if you didn't already have it. Seems good. I don't see that. It's really straightforward code. I don't really see anything wrong with it. Now, we could just go and merge this by clicking the merge pull request button, but we actually want to test this out on our machine first, so we can make sure that it works. And GitHub adds some awesome instructions here if you click on the command line. So they basically show you, cool, if you've already checked out your repository, you can add, you can check that out. You're gonna just, that's all you have to do. It's really simple. Just follow these 2 steps. So yeah, let's jump into the terminal and do this. So I'm actually just going to do this, copy and paste. So what happens here is, number 1, it checks out a new branch with the user's name dash their branch name. So Rodrigo did this in his master branch. We're going to make a branch on our local machine that is called that. And it's going to mirror our master branch because that's where we want to merge it. And then the next command is going to pull that branch from his Git repository into our new branch, and then we'll be able to test it out Then if it works, we check out our master branch, merge his master branch into it, and then we can push it up to GitHub, and then it's officially done. So let's dive into that. So we've got simple calendar checked out on my machine. We just have to paste this in. That was it. As simple as that. We are checked out into the Rodrigo master branch. And if we list the files here, you'll see a bin folder now. You can go into bin. You'll see console and setup. If we run, I'm going to go back out, run bin console. And so it looks like we got a little homebrew warning message. We have kind of a weird homebrew setup on this machine that's shared across multiple users because it's a shared Office Mac. So don't worry about that. But yeah, here we should be able to access this simple calendar module. And we can. So this works perfectly. We can try the bin setup as well. This should just run bundler as you would expect. Resolves dependencies. That's it. Loads up Rails, which has a lot of dependencies as it is, and simple calendar. We're done. I think it's good to merge. So we could just click merge pull request, but it's almost always better to do these things in your terminal. You have full control over it, so you can do it the right way. And this is something that, like, regardless of using GitHub, maybe you're on Bitbucket or your own Git server, anything that you're using, I would follow these instructions generally because they're good practice. And even if you aren't, like, if you don't have this merge pull request button, it's good practice to learn how to use Git appropriately. So what happens here is if we git checkout master, we jump from Rodrigo's branch to our master branch. Then when we merge, we're going to do a no fast forward. And so this basically is going to create a commit here. So I just had a little bit of a snafu. Vim didn't provide the right exit status or something when I did this git merge. And so when I quit Vim here and save this, it thought that Vim had been closed improperly. So I just went and Googled that. I cut that out from this episode because it wasn't really relevant. But if you ever run into this, just Google it. There was a problem with the editor VI. That was it. I just ran the config global core editor to be Vim, and we're back in business. So it's kind of irrelevant in the weeds, but if you run into those things, and I'll try not to cut that out next time, but yeah, if you run into those things, usually you can just Google it and find out more information on it and probably get those solutions pretty quickly. So what happened this time, now that I did the git merge, it successfully went through. If we look at our git logs, we'll see that we now have, here we have my last commit, which is down here. I merged a pull request. And then Rodrigo had 2 commits for his, and we have 1 merge commit. So he owns these commits, and I merged them in to that master branch. And really the last thing we have to do is git push origin master. And if we do, I think -u sets this as the default remote and branch if you were just to run git push with nothing else. So if we were to do git push now, that would be that would push to origin master. So that is what this last commit or last message in the push says basically. So with that said, we're done. And actually, without even refreshing the page on GitHub, they've merged and marked the pull request as merged, which I always love because it's real-time updating now, and they already know the status of these things before you can even tell them. It's awesome. GitHub is fantastic. So yeah, that's it. We've merged a pull request and Rodrigo shows up in the Git history, which is super cool, along with everybody else that's contributed. And we don't really need to release a new version of this. This is still kind of like in progress. There's no benefit to anybody if we were to release a new version of this on Rubygem. So the latest version that I have here is, I forget what version now, not the bin folder, the lib folder, the versions file. We're at 1.1.10. So since this doesn't affect functionality of the app at all, this is more for development stuff, we don't really need to release a new version of that. If we do add a feature in the future that affects the way that things work, we can decide how long do we want to wait till we release a new version or not. I have a tendency to just release lots of new versions as long as they don't break anything. So yeah, I think I'm gonna call it a day. We got a good pull request merged. Maybe we'll take a look at these and see if any of these old ones are worth closing. Some of them are probably old. So this adds the start date to the default classes on the TD tags. So we haven't really talked about this. Simple Calendar generates a table, an HTML table. It has a header. It has multiple rows for however many weeks in the calendar. And then each of the days is a TD tag. So I have this actual like semi-long and gnarly line of code here that will make an array of classes for the TDs. So this is helpful for when you're writing CSS and you want to say this day is in the past, this day is in the past, this day is in the last month and it's in the past, this day is in the future, this is the current day, this is whatever. So we have lots of these. We have the previous month, current month, next month. And the start date is actually kind of useful for people, I'm sure. And it probably doesn't really hurt to add this. It basically is like the start date is this special day. You can pass in the date. That start date is what determines which month to display. So that's like the current day. And yeah. We may want to do that. Also, I'm not sure if it's the same as today. So we have the current calendar. We should look at this and see if it's the same idea of today. So what line of code were we on? 128. Let's go to view the whole file. Let's find line 128. So today is the literal today, and the start date is actually the date from the params. So in the URL, you pass in a day, and that day is what determines, it gets pulled in, and it's what determines how the calendar displays. So if you click next month or next view, then that start date will change, and it will be the first day of that next month, or if it's a 2-week calendar, it'll be the first day of the next 2 weeks. So the start date actually makes a lot of sense. Most people won't use it, and it won't affect them, but it doesn't hurt to have this in there. So I kind of like it. Let's merge it. And I feel terrible because this was a long time ago, and I never merged it in. So I'm gonna be lazy this time, and we're just gonna merge pull requests because there wasn't anything to test really. It seems fine. So let's just do that, call that a day, and get back to working on stuff. I think that's totally fine. Yeah, so this one, I guess we've talked about previously in the past, and there's more to this one, so maybe we'll review this later. Both of these, or all three of these, actually have a little bit of conversation on them. So let's actually dive into this tomorrow. Let's take a look at those. May 7th, March. Clearly I'm not doing a great job of keeping track of these pull requests. But I usually try to make sure I comment at least once. So I answer this guy's question. Don't see any response to it, so I think I'm just going to close the issue and clean this up. So I'll assume that that did what he wanted, and we'll get back to work. So 1 day per page, same thing. I answered the guy's question, do a little housekeeping today before we call it a day. So this one we had a long conversation. Yeah, looks like we got everything working in that one, so we'll close that one too. I clearly need to do a better job of keeping track of these. So let me refresh and update this. Month calendar generates date strings in TDs instead of expected display. Check your HTML and you should see they're all in TD tags. If you're using Bootstrap, it should add the class of table to the calendar. Yep. Yeah, this actually looks like it rendered out properly as a table. There's just no styling on it, so I believe that's totally fine. But regardless, no update since March, so we can assume that it's fixed. Yeah, so what else do we got on this one? Just wanted a custom class in the TD corresponding to the start date for a month calendar, but I also wanted to keep the existing default classes. Was the following. So that's where the start date came from. Yeah, so making your own view helper class. This one is called mini calendar. And then you can pass in these TD classes as an override. I definitely need to spend some time redoing the API here. The API here is terrible. You have to pass in a method name, or basically you have to pass in a proc or a lambda or a block of some sort that can be called later. So this is pretty gnarly because when you got to generate a method, because you don't want to put this inline, that would be terrible. It's too much code, and you don't want to put it inline, and then you have all this. Like, this is a terrible way to interface with the calendar, and I really, really need to clean that up. So, so we've got that, because this, if we look at issue 67 that was referenced here, let's see. There's no easy way. Actually, that's the same one. So the ticket references itself. So we added the pull request to do start time before. We can just close this because the pull request happened. I'm just going to say sorry for being so late on this. I merged your pull request, and this is one of those times where it's like, this one little class isn't worth releasing a brand new gem. So I'm kind of going to hold off, or a brand new gem version. So I'm kind of going to hold off until we actually have something substantial to ship. Because I'm sure that this user has actually been using their fork of the gem in the meantime, if they're using it at all. So so we're just going to say I merge your pull request and should release that in a version shortly. Close and comment. Feel bad about being so super late to that, but it is what it is. Parsing attribute start time causes error. We talked about this a long time. Apparently I asked for example code and didn't get anything, so we can assume that that is no longer relevant as well. So this last ticket that's open was my fault. I need to fix passing, or to allow passing false as an option as a Boolean instead of the string as false. So right now you can pass in an empty string if you want to remove like the previous month link or the next month link, and that's fine. But ideally, it's better if you have, like, if you pass in false, it just doesn't display it. That makes more sense to people. It's a lot more logical. But for now, I think the empty string is probably, like, acceptable. So let's just close that too. And today ended up being, like, just taking a look at the issues and doing some housekeeping. And tomorrow, let's start with RSpec. Let's start by trying to write some tests for this and get that set up. We've got an RSpec file. It doesn't really do anything. What was this commit back in the day? We actually had a spec folder at some point. Where did our spec folder go? I really wonder where that went. I don't actually see it. That's interesting. We may have to figure this out and figure out where our spec went, because I did remember that commit and it's gone now. So yeah, time to do some, now that we've got this housekeeping done, it's time to actually, like, figure out and plan what we're going to work on, start working on it, outline kind of the to-dos, and see if anybody else wants to jump in and hack on this with me. So let's do that tomorrow. Peace.